Something told me to run away, but I ignored it. At first it was just curiosity. A game here, a ritual there. I thought I had control, but I was completely wrong. I saw things that no one should see. I felt presences that were not human. I entered places that seemed normal, but they hid portals, and the more I dived, the more I lost myself. What am I going to tell you here? It's not fiction, it's not theory, and much less exaggeration. This happened to me, and if you came to this video, maybe it's not by chance. If you're also feeling something pulling at you, something you still can't explain, stay with me until the end, because what I experienced can change the way you see the spiritual world, and most importantly, it will free you from something that is already surrounding you, without you realizing it. What I saw, no one should see, but I saw it, and I will tell you, even if it costs me my life. When I walked down those stairs for the first time, I felt like the air changed. It was dense, almost solid, the kind of silence that makes your ears hurt. Each step echoed louder than the last, as if the basement itself was slowly swallowing me. The smell was unbearable, a mix of old mold and something metallic, almost like blood. It was as if the place had a life of its own. But what really scared me was what I saw in the center of that dark room. And it wasn't just the altar. On the stained table, there was a real human skull. I only discovered this later. The skin still felt fresh in some areas, as if it had been removed recently. All around, black candles slowly melting over symbols that I didn't understand. It wasn't film symbolism. They were old marks, hand-drawn, with something I prayed wasn't blood, but it was. I knew it was. With each candle lit, I felt as if a part of my body was freezing inside. I just didn't know why. Yet, in that environment, he, the man who introduced me to all this, seemed different. Not just because of what he wore, but because of the way he spoke. His voice seemed to come from somewhere else, as if it were borrowed. He wouldn't look me in the eye, but he spoke to me as if he had known me for years. He said that this was a portal of transformation, that everything I believed until that day was a lie. And the worst, a part of me I wanted to believe, because deep down, I was looking for something that no one had ever given me. Power, control, answers. But I never imagined what I would have to give in return. He asked me to remain silent throughout the ritual. You just watch, for now. That's what he said. Around the altar, other hooded figures recited words in a language I had never heard. It wasn't Latin, it wasn't Greek, it wasn't from any book. But when they spoke, I felt a headache, as if something was trying to come out of me. The sound was guttural. It vibrated inside my bones. And at that moment I realized this wasn't just theater. It wasn't an act. Something real was happening. Something my human eyes couldn't yet see. I clearly remember the moment one of the candles exploded. It didn't click. It exploded, as if it had been blown from the inside. The fire rose, and a shadow fell against the wall, a shape that was not human. It didn't move like we did. It had no defined contours, but it was there, and he looked at me. I don't know how to explain how a shadow can look at you, but it did. And it was there that something inside me screamed to run, but my body didn't respond, like I'm trapped in myself, and all I could do was watch. From then on, things began to unfold at a speed and intensity that words can barely convey. One of the members fell to the ground, convulsing. The others didn't help. They just increased the tone of the words, and the skull on the altar began to vibrate. I know how absurd this sounds, but I saw it with my own eyes. The skull shook, and something oozed from the empty eyes. It wasn't wax, it wasn't blood. It was something I had never seen in my life. It looked like liquid eyeshadow, and each drop that fell caused a pop as if something was being activated. The man next to me just whispered, "There's no going back now." It was at that moment that I knew something had been opened, something that cannot be closed with simple prayer, something that doesn't come back with immediate regret. I had crossed an invisible line, and from then on, there was no more pretending it was just a joke. There was only one question left that was ringing in my head like a spiritual alarm. What did I do? I lived it. A dark basement, a skull on the altar, a shadow that stared at me, and a voice that whispered, "Now, you are mine." That was just the first step, because what happened after that, no one is prepared to listen. If you want to know what I saw when I crossed the line of no return, sign up now, because next, I will reveal the exact moment I realized that hell had a plan for my soul, and what happened when I tried to escape. Would you have the courage to see what I saw? Then, activate the bell and get ready, because the worst is yet to come. My name is Marcus, and I'm going to tell you about everything I had to go through. I grew up in a Christian home. My mother prayed with me before going to sleep. My father played songs in the car while we went to church. I knew the verses. I knew how to sing the songs. He knew how to appear saved. But knowing is not feeling. Knowing is not living. And over time, religion became just a frame, beautiful on the outside but empty on the inside. And it was in this gap that the void began to speak louder, an emptiness that asked for something more, something intense, something that would do to feel something real. It was during adolescence that everything began to change. I was 16 when I met a classmate at school who seemed different. He was not popular, but he attracted attention. There was something in his eyes, a strange, almost hypnotic confidence. One day during a break, he showed me a book with a black cover without a title, full of symbols. He said it was just curiosity, a book on ancient magic. We laughed, we leafed through, and at that moment, I felt goosebumps, but I ignored it. It was just a book, right? Little did I know that book was a key, and I was about to open a door that I would never be able to close again. It started with simple things, summoning games, like compass game, Ouija board. At first, it was even funny. We did this at a friend's house laughing, recording on our cell phones, but there was one time when the glass moved on its own, and no one laughed. The silence in that room was so heavy that it seemed as if time had stopped. Still, this only fueled our curiosity. If it's real, then we can control it, we thought, as if we were in control, as if what was on the other side wanted to play with us and not devour us. At 17 years old, it wasn't just games anymore. I was reading grimoires, studying chaos magic, engaging in deep occult online forums. I started writing down strange dreams, symbols that I saw out of nowhere, names that appeared repeatedly. Some of these names, I later discovered, were ancient names of demons in forbidden texts. And believe me, when you start calling them names like that, someone responds. And that's exactly what happened to me. But I didn't want to stop. I wanted more. At 18, I was already part of a tight circle, a small but very active group. We met in abandoned houses, forests, even cemeteries. We brought offerings, animal blood, black candles, objects stolen from churches. We started making pacts, small ones at the beginning, that I can pass the test, that so-and-so likes me. But soon the orders got bigger, and so did the prices. The first time I participated in a blood ritual, my hands were shaking. But after it was over, I felt an adrenaline rush that no drug could give me afterwards. I was hooked, not in blood, in power. I started to think I was invincible. I went through dark places and felt as if nothing could touch me, as if I had something in me that separated me from others. I began to despise everything that was weak: faith, church, prayer. I saw people praying and laughed inside. They don't know what true power is, I thought. Little did I know that while I thought I dominated the spiritual world, he was the one dominating me. And the more I got involved, the more I felt like something was watching me, even in the mirror. But that is a story for a little while. I started having strange visions. Sometimes while taking a shower, I would see faces on the wall. In the reflection of the mirror, my eyes seemed to change color for seconds. My dreams turned into constant nightmares. But instead of retreating, I went deeper, because every sign was like a prize. If this is happening, it's because I'm on the right path, I said to myself. I confused destruction with evolution. And when the soul begins to accept the poison as nectar, that's when hell smiles, because he knows you'll keep drinking. Today I see everything clearly, but at the time I had lost any sense of reality. The physical world seemed boring. I lived for the early mornings, for the rituals, for the meetings with the group. We hid everything from our families. We lied easily, and the more we lied, the more our conscience fell asleep. It was as if a fog took over my mind. I was no longer me, but to realize it was necessary to go even deeper, much deeper. Have you ever had that strange feeling of messing with something that seemed harmless, but deep down it was pulling you towards something much darker? Maybe it started with curiosity, but then the signals became too strong to ignore. Comment here now, yes or no.
And tell me, have you ever experienced something that you couldn't explain? Something that seemed too spiritual to be just a coincidence? Because I'm going to take you with me, and you'll see what for the ritual that changed everything and what appeared in that place. Not everyone would have the courage to face it. I was officially initiated into a sect with over 30 members, all different from each other, but with one thing in common: the thirst for power. There, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, educated or illiterate. What mattered was your willingness to give yourself completely. One of the leaders was an excommunicated former priest. He had a disturbing look. It didn't blink. He spoke little, but when he opened his mouth, each word carried a spiritual charge that made the environment heavy. He said that knowledge of God was incomplete without knowledge of the enemy, and it was exactly this enemy that we were about to invoke that night. The ritual was scheduled for dawn. The chosen location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We arrived in silence, one by one, all in black. The iron door made a sharp sound as it opened, as if it was crying from being used again. Inside, the air was musty, the floor covered in dust and old soot marks, but in the center of the warehouse, a large circle was drawn with pig's blood. I saw when the bucket was opened. The smell was horrible, strong, thick. The symbol on the ground was complex, with runes and scratched words that seemed to pulse. Everything was prepared for the collective pact. And the feeling? It was as if the air vibrated with an invisible expectation. Something was about to happen, and we knew we wouldn't be the same after that. When the former priest began to intone his first words, the atmosphere immediately changed. The sails fluttered, even without wind. The environment became colder, but it was not physically cold. It was a cold that entered the soul. And then came the screams, not the group's screams, other screams. Screams that seemed to cross dimensions. They were multiple, disorderly, desperate. Screams of pain, of hate, and of hunger. At the time I wanted to run, but my legs stopped. I was paralyzed, and I realized that others did too. It was as if something was forcibly keeping us there, watching our reaction, testing us. It was at that moment that one of the members fell to the ground. His eyes turned away, leaving only white. The mouth opened, and a tongue that wasn't his began to come out. Not physically, but vocally. He spoke in ancient, unrecognizable languages, with a voice that was not his. It was serious, hoarse, reverberating. The ex-priest approached and said, "He has been chosen." And instead of helping, he just started laughing, a slow, dark laugh, as if he were proud. At that moment, I understood. The door had been opened, and what was on the other side entered. From that night on, my life became a constant nightmare. I saw figures, even with the light on. The mirror in my room seemed to distort my reflection, as if I was looking at something that wore my image, but wasn't me. At night, I heard whispers, not complete sentences, just loose words like surrender of flesh, blood, acceptance. I started waking up with scratches on my back, even though I slept alone. One day, I woke up with 3 parallel marks on my chest. They looked like claws. I showed it to the sect leader. He just smiled and said, "They marked you." It was after this that I received an order to make a personal sacrifice, something intimate, something that proved I belonged there. The instruction was simple but brutal: kill my mother's cat. At the time I hesitated, but the hesitation lasted seconds. I was so blind, so taken by the illusion that this would give me more spiritual access, that I obeyed. I took the cat to the bathroom, prepared a mini altar, and did exactly what they said. To this day, I can't erase the sound of that meow. It was the only moment in months that I cried. But even though I cried, I continued. Because, at that moment, the fear of being punished for what didn't see was greater than the love for anything I saw. And the worst, after that ritual, there was no reward. There was no revelation. There was no power, just darkness, and a constant feeling that someone, or something, was inside me and didn't want to come out. Could you sleep after hearing screams that don't come from any human mouth, or seeing someone speak with a voice that doesn't belong to their own body? Comment here, yes or no, and tells me, have you ever been in an environment where you felt that something supernatural was present? In the next part, I'll tell you what started to happen to me after that. The physical manifestations, the invisible attacks, and the time a Bible caught fire alone in my room. You're not ready, but you need to know. After that sacrifice, it seemed like a door had been opened, but it wasn't a door of blessings. It was an abyss.
and I no longer knew how to close it. I began to realize that, even without performing rituals,
Evil was active around me. I no longer needed to call, and he was already with me. It all started subtly. Photos of my mother started coming out strange, distorted. In one, her face appeared to stretch like a rubber mask. The eyes turned off, the smile crooked, and the scariest thing, she was not moving when the photo was taken, but the image showed something else, a shadow on the side, as if there was someone or something next to her. At the time, I ignored it. I told myself it was a camera defect or some printing error, but other signs soon came. An uncle of mine who made fun of the things I said and laughed at my rituals had a stroke out of the blue. A healthy man in his early 50s collapsed in the middle of a family lunch. I remember the phrase he said the day before, "If these demons really exist, let them catch me." The next day, it fell. And even though no one connected one thing to another, inside me I knew, and the worst part, a part of me felt powerful because
Of it. But what affected me most were the nights. I started hearing footsteps in my room, shuffled steps as if someone were barefoot, walking slowly. Sometimes the footsteps stopped next to the bed, and I held my breath. I thought, if I don't move, this will go away. But he wouldn't. There were nights when I heard a whisper in my ear, disjointed words, but said with contained anger. A presence watched me, and I knew it wanted more. More than my time, more than my attention. She wanted my soul. There was a specific night that I never forgot. I woke up in the middle of the night, but I couldn't move. My eyes were open, but my body was locked. A total paralysis. And then I saw it. There was something on top of me. A dark figure with red, intense, lively eyes, sitting on my chest. The weight was unbearable. I could barely breathe. I felt like I was drowning in my own room. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. And only after minutes of total panic, I managed to let out a scream. When my mother ran in, the figure had already disappeared, but the smell might stayed, a smell of burning flesh and old iron. She said I was pale as a dead man, and that my eyes were completely black. I just said it was a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. From then on, the episodes intensified. I saw figures even during the day. Objects fell by themselves. My bedroom door would open at dawn, even though it was locked. And each night, a new type of spiritual torment manifested itself. But I wasn't looking for help. I told myself that was the price of power, that this was all part of the journey, that the chosen suffer most. This was how I justified the destruction of my sanity. I convinced myself that I had control, but deep down, I was already lost. My mind no longer obeyed me. He had memory lapses. I woke up in places I didn't remember going to. I started writing strange words on papers without realizing it. Words that, when I researched, had their origins in dead languages. One of them was used in human sacrifice rituals in ancient times, and yet I ignored everything. I continued living as if everything was under control, because the truth is, I was addicted to the control I thought I had. But the truth was much darker. Control had been taken from me a long time ago. Have you ever felt like you're being watched even when you're alone? Or have you ever experienced something during the night that made you doubt reality? Comment here, yes or no, and tell me if you've ever woken up paralyzed, unable to move. Because what I'm going to reveal in the next part will prove that these attacks are more real than you might think. In the sequel, you will find out how I tried to escape and what started to happen when the spiritual world realized that I wanted to escape. They didn't like that at all. It was dawn. Another one of those nights when I felt like the physical world was no longer enough for me. I needed to go further. I needed to expand my consciousness. As some books I was studying said, I prepared everything as I learned. Black candle, myrrh incense, a mirror in the center, and blood, my own blood, dripped into a container with coarse salt and charcoal. I believed I was opening mental portals, but I was actually calling out something that should never be called out. And this time, that something answered. During the ritual, I felt my body become light, as if I were floating. My heart was pounding, but my muscles were relaxing. I focused on an ancient inverted prayer, which said to open the inner mind to hidden dimensions. But before I finished the last word, everything went dark. My body fell to the ground, and my consciousness was sucked into dense darkness. I fainted, but what came next was more real than anything I'd ever experienced awake. I woke up, or rather, I woke up, in a suffocating place. I was standing but my legs weren't touching the floor. I was suspended, held by chains as thin as thread but made of thorns. The thorns went through my skin as if they were sewing my soul to that prison. All around, deformed shapes moved. They didn't walk, they crawled. Creatures covered in scales, others with atrophied wings, eyes on their shoulders, mouths on their chests. Some had human faces mixed with animal snouts, and an unbearable smell of rotting flesh filled the air. They didn't speak, but they knew who I was. They approached and laughed without sound. I tried to scream, but my mouth was sewn shut with red light, and even without speaking I could feel what they were thinking. You came of your own free will. Now, you'll see what that costs. The pain was constant, but the despair was greater. The heat was suffocating. It was no ordinary fire. It was a heat that burned from the inside out, as if my soul was being slowly incinerated. And still, I couldn't die. In the midst of this torment, a greater presence approached. I didn't see her. I felt. It was as if the air itself knelt before her. The darkness grew thicker and a voice appeared. A voice that didn't echo, penetrated. Serious, mocking, with a weight that crushed my conscience. She said, "You swore your soul. Now, it's mine." Those words stuck with me. I felt as if something was being ripped from my body with that entity's own hands, and when I tried to fight back, something even worse happened. I started reliving all the moments I participated in rituals, only this time, through the eyes of the victims. I saw the eyes of the cat I sacrificed. I felt the despair of the souls trapped in the summoning circles. I was, at the same time, the executioner and the sacrificed. It was as if hell was showing me a reflection of my own destruction, and then out of nowhere I was thrown back, as if he had been spat on. I woke up on the bedroom floor, panting, shaking, sweaty. The mirror was broken. The incense had stopped burning on its own. And what scared me most, my nose was bleeding, and on my chest, 3 claw-shaped marks crossed the skin. They weren't normal scratches, they were burns, as if something had marked me there. That night was not a dream. It wasn't a delusion. It was a reminder. And worse than that, it was a warning. At that moment, I understood that I was no longer just playing with hidden forces. I had signed a pact that went beyond words. But the question that started echoing in my mind was, is there still time to go out? Or have I gone too far? Have you ever had a dream so real that you woke up with your body marked? Or have you ever felt like you visited a place you shouldn't have gone and came back different? Comment here, yes or no, and tell me, have you ever experienced something that seemed like a vision, but was too real to be just a dream? I'm going to tell you what happened when I tried to get help, and how the spirit world responded with fury. What I saw that morning was just the beginning of the war. After that vision, I understood. I needed to leave. It was either that or go crazy once and for all. I remembered a pastor I knew as a child, a simple but firm man. At the time I mocked his prayers, but now he was my only hope. I called. He just said, "We need to talk." He didn't ask why. He just replied, "Come now." On the way to the church, the sky was clear, but my chest felt like it was carrying a storm. I felt as if something was following me, as if my every step towards the light provoked a furious reaction from the darkness that I myself once invited. The conversation was quick. There was nothing left to hide. I told everything. He listened in silence with just the Bible open on his lap. When I finished, he looked into my eyes and said, "What you called now wants to possess you, but whoever created you wants to set you free." It hit like a hammer. It was the first time in years that someone had spoken to me about God with authority, and for a moment, I felt hope. But that spark was short-lived, because that same night hell decided to remind me that no one leaves unscathed. It started with dreams, nightmares so real that I woke up not knowing where I was. I dreamed that I was drowning in a black lake, with invisible hands pulling my legs. There was no bottom, there was no light, just screams. When I woke up, my body was drenched in sweat, and the sheets were tangled up as if I had been fighting for hours. But the worst part wasn't the dream itself, it was the feeling that someone had been in the room with me while I slept. Then came the voices. They didn't scream, they whispered, like a soft poison that slowly drips until it dominates you. I heard things like, "Get it over with already. No one will miss you. You're already ours." And I tried to resist. I tried to pray, but the mind was weak, and the environment around me seemed to conspire against any attempt at liberation.
The lights in the house started to flicker on their own. At first, I thought it was the electrical network. I called an electrician. He changed the wiring. Nothing has changed. Sometimes the TV would turn on by itself, always at 3 a.m. One time she called with a black screen and a strange hissing noise, and a voice whispered from the background, "Time, come back." That word haunted me for days. It appeared in thoughts, dreams, even scribbled on pieces of paper that I didn't remember writing, but nothing compared to what I saw one morning. I woke up to the sound of something falling to the floor. When I went to check, I saw the Bible, the same one the pastor had given me hours before, open in the center of the room. But the most bizarre, the pages were on fire, alone, no lighter, no candle, with nothing around. The fire did not consume the book like ordinary paper. It burned from the inside out, a bright orange color, as if it had a life of its own. And in the silence of the house, only the crackle of the flames spoke. That was no accident. It was a message. That's when I understood. Leaving wouldn't be easy. It was no longer a question of I want it or I don't want it. I wasn't just being chased. I was the battlefield. Have you ever had the feeling that something invisible was watching you while you slept? Or have you heard voices that no one else has heard? Comment here, yes or no, and tell me, have you ever experienced any type of spiritual manifestation that seemed like a warning or a threat? Because in the next part, I'm going to tell you what happened when the pastor started praying for me, and how 3 different voices came out of my mouth as a light appeared in the darkest place in my life. At the height of despair, I could no longer fight alone. The torment had passed the limit. It wasn't about nightmares or voices anymore. It was a constant presence hovering around me. I felt bad even when I took a shower, even in the silence of the morning. The weight was unbearable. It was then that a childhood friend who still attended church saw me on the street and stopped. He looked into my eyes and said, "You need to come to worship with me today. This is no longer psychological, it's spiritual." Skeptical, but broken, I went. Because at that point, either I was healed or I was going to give up everything. It was a small church, no stage, no band, no screen, just a microphone, an open Bible, and a few scattered chairs. The atmosphere was simple, but charged, unlike anything I had ever felt. When I walked in, I felt like something was holding me at the door. It was as if an invisible field resisted my entry. The body became heavy, the head dizzy, the chest is tight. But I went. I sat on the last bench, quietly, and I stood there watching until the pastor started speaking, and the atmosphere changed again. He didn't preach, he prayed. Each word seemed to reach areas that had been closed off within me for years. I was shaking. The heart was racing. My fingers tingled. It was like my body knew what was coming, but my mind was still trying to escape, until he pointed at me, and without ever having seen me before, and said, "Today, chains will be broken. Someone here came from the occult, but will come out with light." At that time, something in me broke. My eyes filled with tears, and before I knew it, I was already on the ground. I didn't fall gracefully. It was as if he had been knocked down. The body began to twitch. My stomach turned, and then the voices started to come. Out. 3 different voices. One hoarse, one thin, and one that seemed to echo as if it were inside a cave. I felt my throat being used. My tongue moved on its own. I screamed, but it wasn't me. It was as if my mouth was taken over by forces that had been inside me for much longer than I imagined. It was at that moment that a woman began to pray in tongues. She was sitting, but she stood up as if she had been pushed by the Holy Spirit. He walked up to me with his eyes closed and began uttering words that I didn't understand, but that the hell I understood very well. And then came the light. It didn't come from the ceiling. It didn't come from outside. It came from within. It was an intense but soft light, as if my soul, even drowned in darkness, still had a point of purity, waiting to be rekindled. In that inner flash, I saw a figure, not with physical eyes, but with the eyes of the soul, and a voice, like liquid music, echoed inside me with tenderness and authority at the same time. "I've known you since the womb, come back to me." That sentence took me apart. There was no condemnation. There was no accusation. Just a call, full of love. And that was where everything changed. I started crying like a child. My body relaxed. The voices stopped. The heat went out. The weight, which had accompanied me for years, simply evaporated. And at that moment, I was freed. The emptiness that gnawed at me gave way to a soft, enveloping presence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The name Jesus came out of my mouth, weak at first, then firm, and from then on never left. Have you ever felt a presence so strong that you didn't know whether to cry or fall to your knees? Have you ever been touched by something invisible, but it filled you inside in a way that nothing else could? Comment here, yes or no. And tell me, have you ever had an encounter with God so real that it seemed impossible to explain in words? In the next part, I will tell you what I discovered after liberation, and how I began to see hidden truths that many churches are afraid to expose. The war is not over. She just changed fields. Now, I fight on the side of light. After my release, something inside me changed, but not just spiritually. It was as if a curtain had been torn before my eyes. I started to notice things that were always around, but that I never saw. I started to see the signs, the codes, the gestures, messages hidden in places where no one thinks to look. And then I understood why hell fights so hard to keep people distracted, why once you see it, there's no way to unsee it anymore. I began to study, to investigate with my now awakened spiritual eyes, and I discovered that the music and entertainment industry, the one that many consume without a filter, is infested with pacts disguised as art. Letter by letter, clip by clip, symbols and messages are placed as creativity, but behind it, there are rituals. There are consecrations. There are entities being invoked. And it's not a conspiracy theory. I saw people in the artistic world deliver personal objects to altars and sing verses in languages they didn't even understand, all in exchange for fame, power, and influence over you and your home. And it doesn't stop there. Social networks have become showcases of the modern occult. Many of the world's most followed influencers who dictate fashion, behavior, sexuality, and mentality to millions of young people use specific phrases and gestures that carry spiritual power, but not the good kind. They are codes, silent languages, a symbol with hands, a word repeated with specific intonation, and when you consume it with an open heart, you are, without knowing it, giving spiritual legality for it to enter you. Mainstream culture has become an altar, and the audience doesn't even realize they are participating in the cult. But what really made me freeze were the reports, and then confirmations, of secret cults taking place inside renowned universities. Yes, universities, places that call themselves temples of knowledge, but hide basements where, in the name of spiritual freedom or transmutation ritual, students are invited to participate in rites with real sacrifices. In a specific case, which I witnessed and reported, human flesh was used in a ceremony held in the early hours of the morning. The pretext? Activate ancestry. But what was activated there was a collective curse. And worse, no one was arrested, because those involved had influence, title, public respect. People ask me, "Why do you say these things, Marcus?" And I answer, because no one talks anymore. Many churches avoid touching on these subjects. They prefer to talk only about blessings, promises, and prosperity. But the people are being destroyed due to lack of knowledge, and I was not freed to remain silent. I was freed to expose the darkness with the light that reached me. And that's why I say, with all conviction, they don't want you to know that, because if you know, you wake up. And who wakes up to free yourself? But before liberation comes the crisis. The confrontation comes, because facing the truth requires courage. And only those who have courage remain standing when the ground shakes. Have you ever had the feeling that there is something much bigger happening behind the music, films, and social media, as if everything had been designed to anesthetize and blind? Comment here, yes or no, and tell me sincerely, have you ever suspected that there is something spiritual behind the content we consume every day? In the next part, I will tell you how, even after liberation, the scars remained, and what do I need to do to this day to not be swallowed again? Because being free is not the end of war, it is the beginning of vigilance. Today, I am an evangelist. This seems simple, almost light when said like that, but only those who have dealt with hell know how much weight this light has. I travel the whole country telling my story. I've been to large churches, small communities, prisons, schools, squares, and even street corners where no one wants to preach anymore. I don't talk about religion. I talk about the war I lived through. Because if there's anything the devil fears more than a full church and a former prisoner who was freed and now opens locks with his testimony. But even with all this walking, I still carry scars. not from the body, from the soul. I still sometimes wake up with nightmares, dreams where I'm trapped again in that place of darkness, dreams where I hear that same voice that once whispered, "Now you are mine." But in those moments, I don't despair, because now by my side, there is someone hell can't face. I bend my knees, raise my hand, and call out the name that rescued me, Jesus. I learned that liberation is not an event, it's a lifestyle. That's why to this day I need constant fasting, because the flesh always tries to remember the taste of sin, because the doors I once opened still try to call me back. The devil is not satisfied when someone escapes from his hands. He waits for an opening, wait for pride, wait for relaxation. And that's why I watch like someone who has already lost everything once and is not willing to lose it again. Today I have a family, a wife who saw me cry at the altar and chose to build a new story with me. Children who don't know the details of what I experienced yet, but who
Are already praying for me like little warriors. And a ministry. Not on stage, but in the trenches, because every time I go up to preach, I don't go up alone. I go up carrying the stories of those who didn't have the chance to get out of the same hole I did. And every word I release was a direct attack on the plans of hell. Yes, I have peace. Not the artificial peace the world sells, but the peace that comes when you know you have been rescued from death. Whose peace? Look in the mirror and finally see someone real looking back. The peace of those who know that they no longer need to pretend, nor run, nor hide. Because right now, the light is not what I chase. It's what lives inside me. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Those who walk with hell never forget. But those who walk with Jesus, they are healed even in memories. Do you believe that someone can be completely transformed even after having lived at rock bottom? Even after having touched evil with your own hands? Comment here, yes or no, and tells me, have you ever seen someone that no one believed in anymore be completely restored by God? Because in the last part, I want to make a call to you. A warning, an invitation, a warning. Something that maybe, if you need to hear it yourselves before it's too late. This was not just a spiritual horror story. It was a brutal reminder that the invisible world is as real as the air we breathe, and that every choice we make, even the ones that seem small, has eternal weight. Marcus was not a murderer nor a criminal. He was an ordinary teenager, curious, insecure, thirsty for answers. And this is precisely how evil enters, disguised as knowledge, empowerment, spiritual freedom. But what begins with an innocent book may end with a soul in chains. The good news is that Jesus still frees, still rescues, still restores. And it doesn't matter how deep you go, he always goes deeper to reach you. If this story spoke to you, don't ignore this touch. Because when the Holy Spirit whispers, it's because he wants to wake you up. If you felt something different in this video, don't ignore it. This isn't just content, it's spiritual confrontation. Sign up now, because those who live in sleep never realize when evil knocks on the door. But whoever awakens with the truth becomes a light in the midst of darkness. Activate the bell, because the next videos will reveal to you what most people hide. Here, we talk about real liberation, of restored lives, of truths that hell doesn't want you to know. Thank you very much for getting here. This already shows that you are not like others. You are thirsty for something deeper. See you in the next video. May the Holy Spirit continue to awaken you until you never sleep spiritually again. Shalom, and see you soon.